Hello, welcome to ISE Show TV. My name is Paul Milligan and welcome to this latest panel discussion at ISE 2020 in Amsterdam. Many thanks for joining us. This topic for today is looking at IT skills, AV skills, and how you sort of merge the two, really. Joining me today, we have a real interesting mix of end users, manufacturers, and consultants. So nearest to me is Daniel Jackson from Crestron. Next to him is Stuart Mitchell from the European Weather Centre. Next to him is Mike Halliday from Cordless Consultants, and at the end, last but not least, is Peter Hunt from consultancy group Hewshott. So first of all, if we could just go kind of one by one, maybe starting with Crestron. Talk to me about how AV skills and IT skills are they separated in your business, or is it all one giant lovely team?
Well, you know, we have a number of offices around the world, so I honestly lost count, but it was about 90 when I last checked. And so when you have that many distributed offices, you know, the person in that office really has to be an expert in everything. You can't just have an AV person and an IT person, right? They're one person running the whole office. Of course, in our main offices, you have a bigger team, but I think the reality is these skills have become blended and shared. It's just been forced by the geography and the limited number of people you can actually staff in each location.
Sure. And Stuart, how do you divvy up the sort of AV and IT?
Because it's a relatively small organisation, we're only 400 people, single site, self-contained, and I actually work in the computing department myself, actually an IT guy by background. All the AV work comes down to me. So okay. I'm it, basically. So I would love to have a team. In fact, we're planning on expanding it a bit more, so people to have more AV expertise as well. But as we were saying, like at Crestron, the technologies are so similar and merged together. You know, the network is the computer, is the AV equipment, that I think the IT world is absorbing a lot of the AV functions. So for specific installations, I still rely on external contractors, external consultants, but some of the low-level staff, the day-to-day stuff, we can keep in-house. And that's really within the IT department itself, and there isn't a separate AV team per se.
Yeah. Mike, how does that, the consultants at the end there, I mean, the question to both of you really, how do you work on IT projects alone, or do you find the two disciplines mixed, and how do you divvy that workload up in your business?
We don't tend to work exclusively on IT projects. Most of them, the work that we get tends to be multidisciplinary, so IT, AV, and increasingly security as well. And being a multidisciplinary practice, we obviously have specialists in all the individual fields. We're nowhere near as big as the likes of Crestron, even yourselves. There's only, as you know, 10 or tens of us rather than hundreds or even thousands. But we've got specialist teams, each with their own set of expertise. Specialists within those teams, you know, with the AV team, we've got audio specialists, design managers, design engineers, project management teams as well. We do work separately to an extent because there are very different skill sets, particularly when it comes to system design. But to your point, absolutely there's a massive crossover now, not just with IT in terms of distribution, but also when you're talking about unified communications, video conferencing, all of that is now merging. There's a huge amount of crossover between all the teams. So whilst we have different disciplines that we work with, we're very much one team on a simple project.
So you're like a kind of football manager, and you're choosing the best people
exactly.
for that particular project.
Absolutely, right? And it comes out even at the point when we know what the project's about. We look at who's going to be a best fit for that particular scheme, so that we're always placing the right people at the right time for the right project.
Peter, how does Hewshott
very similar,
divide
really.
or not?
Yeah, very similar. We've had to bring IT in-house. As you know, when we sort of started off life as AV consultants, it became apparent to me around about 2010-11 that we needed to have IT skills in-house, so we brought them in-house, and very similarly we've applied them as the AV has become more and more over IP. We've had to have IT people in-house who can speak that language to enable it and make it happen on a client's network. So very similar, and our IT resources get pulled into projects all over the world. As the way that we operate, that's how we have to do it. And I think Dan Lee, our UK MD, said you can't deliver AV unless you understand IT, and I think he's absolutely right.
Sure. I mean, we've been talking about AV and IT integration for as long as until the cows come home, really. But it's say at Crestron, for example, do you find that there are IT specialists and then AV specialists, or are you trying to give skills of one group to the other? Are you trying to sort of merge those skills? You said that people have to do both.
Right. You certainly have to cross-train people all the time, but like any organization, you have your specialists. You have your audio specialist. You have your control programming specialist. You have your unified communications specialist. You'll always have these people, especially when you're talking about centralized planning of the system. So planning, you absolutely have to have specialists because you have to know in a great detail, what's going on and what the right architecture is. But when it goes to the support side, it flips. You have to be a generalist because you have to be able to walk into a space and understand the troubleshooting across all the systems that are there, which means by definition you have to be that generalist.
Yeah. So you said you're an IT person by
trade,
and then you're having to do the AV. That seems to be quite common in terms of you will, if you're an IT person, you will by default almost pick up some IT knowledge, then you maybe set on an IT training course or something. How does that come
So for me it was the other way around. So I started my life as an IT professional and then fell into the AV world sideways. It's quite a common story, I think. I'm a member of the AV user group as well, and one of the stories we have is a lot of people come to the industry sideways. They haven't deliberately chosen it, so they come through other arenas from theatre, audio production, music production, IT. So I think there's a mixture of skilled backgrounds from people coming into the industry anyway. In my situation, I've had to learn a lot about all the different elements of AV, the audio elements, the video elements, because I can then instruct external companies what I'm trying to achieve with particular installations. So I won't necessarily know all the details, I rely on them for that part of it. But you still, as an end user, I believe, need to be informed to the point that you can have an intelligent conversation, with specialists, with consultants, and have an appreciation of all the areas of technology so that you can understand how it goes together.
I guess, this one goes to kind of Mike and Peter really. Is the dream you find someone with both skills, or do they not exist and you find one with one and you have to give them the other, help them with the other?
I personally think that even though we're living in a converged world, the two skill sets of AV and IT still exist as two different skill sets. Even within AV, you'll have an audio skill set and a video skill set, a control skill set. And in IT, you have the different levels, security and networking and all sorts. So whilst the two disciplines are definitely have merged, have come together, what I think is important to do is make sure that we don't think that automatically IT people can become good AV people and vice versa. The two have to exist together and recognise that each other have equal stakeholders in a solution that's going to be provided to an end user, and I think that's very important.
Mike, how do Cordless work? Do you get one and train them in the other, or is the dream getting both? Can you get both?
We don't tend to find people who have just exclusively understand IT or AV. There's obviously a lot of knowledge and expertise that comes before we even employ anyone anyway. But we look for AV specialists because they're actually quite rare by comparison to IT specialists. It seems to be that skill set is not as available as we'd like, particularly when it comes to audio. That's a big issue that we find, not just in our world as consultants, but actually in the whole integrator market. They're actually getting that commissioning correct, making sure that all the audio systems are balanced and commissioned properly is a big challenge. Even though everyone says they can do it, they don't do it as well as they can, and then the room suffers, the whole system suffers. And you need to understand about the audio side of that to be able to troubleshoot, to be able to understand and translate that to the clients, the end users, even the integrators, and say you need to improve this because IT skills aren't going to help that. It's a very different discipline. But at the same time, obviously, you need to understand how those signals are going, because it may not be a commissioning issue with the actual audio balancing and EQ and all of that. It may be the distribution that's the problem, or maybe the network itself. It may be something completely different. So you've got to understand and have that knowledge that's complete crossover to be able to troubleshoot and get through things effectively.
Peter, how do you feel about the audio angle? Does that kind of something that
I agree. I think Mike's right. I think at a certain level, I think there has to be a base level of knowledge across both disciplines. But at the level that we like to operate at, and I'm sure others do as well, because of this very specialist nature of our work, we like to see specialists rise up above that baseline, if you like, and to have the baseline knowledge plus the specialist knowledge in a specific field. Audio is always been a big problem. We see this time and time again. It's one of the reasons I think that we got involved in acoustics very early on, and back in 2005, because then you can take away the room design as a blame for poor acoustics, and then you start putting it back to the integrators and go, the room acoustics are good, you've now got to sort out the audio, and they do, not all of them, but I would say probably more often than not, they do scratch their heads and they struggle a little bit with the audio. I am an audio specialist and others are as well, and you go to those people and you can drill down and get things really, really tight.
So just a quick question. Do you interact with the actual architectural parts of the process as well? You know, in the initial design of spaces?
Architecture as in building things?
Yeah, as in building rooms and stuff like that. Okay, yeah, so you can advise on the actual built environment.
Yes.
Because I always think that's always the problem, I think, or one of the problems, is when you don't start from the right place, it's very hard to rectify the audio.
It is, and there's a little bit of a struggle sometimes, particularly on projects where the budget is tight, not to engage an acoustician, and we see people sort of fall over and trip themselves up a little bit on that.
Audio is the sort of poor partner because you can't see it. And even though it's a primary sense, it's one of the primary senses we have, and people notice problems with audio much more than video. So in a video conference call, you've probably had it, where there's a dropout in the audio or there's very poor quality, it destroys the whole call. And even if, so as opposed to the video dropping out, as long as you can hear the person.
And the telling part of that is that people decide to abandon a video call and go to an audio conference.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they drop back to phone.
So there's a phrase in broadcast which is that radio is the theatre of the mind, and it's a very good expression because it means that when you have audio, people form their own view about what things look like and what they sound like, and provided it's good and consistent, that just works. So I think we can always afford to be better at what we do. I think we always are consistently learning.
Find specialists, acoustic specialists.
Sorry?
How easy or difficult is it to find acoustic?
Well, interestingly, acousticians become qualified with basically engineering degrees and go on and practice in acoustics in much the same way that IT becomes qualified and goes on and practices in the IT world. The gap is the AV space, because there are no formal qualifications in AV, and that's where things can go wrong as well as right.
Yeah, well, there's the AVIXA CTS program. Are you familiar with that? Or?
I'm very familiar with that. It's probably a topic for another discussion.
But can you grab acousticians, or are they making enough money on their own that they don't need to
we employ acousticians. We employ acousticians, and we get involved. I mean, our acoustics work is not just on room designs. Our acoustics work can be on vibration issues or environmental acoustics, or building foundations over underground stations and things like that. So acoustics is a very broad church in that respect. The area that we're focused on when the AV world is getting the meeting room acoustics right, or a stage or a theatre or something like that right. And when we do big projects, we either insist that we do the acoustics or we assist an acoustician as appointed. And there are very, very good acousticians out there, much better than we are, frankly, but there are very, very good ones out there that do a very good job. I'm very happy to work amongst them. The key thing is to have the right people doing the job. So whether that's an IT person or an acoustician, which you can measure through qualification, or with a deep breath, an AV person.
I mean, the fact that we're talking about an audio person and a video person and an IT person, hopefully all in one, I mean, is that just a consequence of the fact that we all now live in thanks to people like Crestron, an AV over IP world, and actually we need ... over IP people rather than those individual skills?
I think everybody's going to have a good foundation on IP. You don't necessarily have to be the infinite expert in that, but the reality is most things are going over IP now because the economics make sense. Look at microphones. They used to be hung individually and strung back with analog. A lot of it's just a network connected DSP in the ceiling. You've got network connected amplifiers, network connected or PoE speakers that are starting to come out. We have virtualized our control, so now it can also be run on a a VMware instance on a server somewhere. A lot of it's going that space because the economics make sense. So you have to have audio plus networking, or control plus networking. Whatever you have to be that plus networking nowadays.
I mean, do you think we're all becoming kind of network specialists rather than anything?
I think rather than network specialists, I think you have to be a network, someone who can appreciate what needs to happen in the network, and you rely on the network. And at the moment, I think what we're seeing, especially in my organisation, is move to the cloud. So we're using and relying on cloud services more and more. And so you don't have necessarily on-premise hardware and software. The software's out in the cloud. So it's virtualized, it's running in a virtual server, it's as a service. You're moving from a CapEx spend to an OpEx spend, so a subscription model for the services. And a lot of that means that as long as you've got a good partner, as long as you've got the right technology, a lot of that expertise you can rely on outside. So as long as you know how to drive it, it's like knowing how to drive a car. You can drive a car without being able to take the engine apart.
Yeah.
But at least you know what to do with the steering wheel and the gear stick. Yeah. And I think the same is true in the AV over IP world. You need to understand it's there, you need to understand a little bit about it, but at the end of the day, all you're really worried about as an end user is delivering a good experience to the organisation.
Sure. Do you think we're developing in 10 years' time? We were talking about, whatever it is, over IP engineers rather than any of these other stuff we've been.
Well, I think that's obviously a delivery mechanism, but that's only part of the story. I mean, to your point about room acoustics, you need to make sure that's sorted, get that up front, but not just that, the whole room design, the whole user experience is not, I mean, that's, again, IP is just a means of monitoring, managing, distributing. It doesn't really give you anything else. It's very effective and it's very cost effective, and it's obviously now putting a huge dependency on the IT world to deliver the AV systems where they could be quite separate before. So now you've got actually the end users now starting to merge their departments a little bit closer, because they've realised that they can't just have two separate departments arguing over whose fault it is, because it is basically becoming one great big thing. But absolutely, you've got so much more. You can't just say that because it's on the network we don't need AV people anymore, because that's literally just one small piece. Yes, it's a massive dependency, but you've got so many other elements that you need to consider when considering decent AV design for, be it a workplace or even a football stadium. It could be anything, but it's all about that end experience rather than the delivery mechanism. Is just a natural progression of where it's going. And yes, obviously going into the cloud, which puts a lot more on your bandwidth externally as well.
Peter, finally to you, are we all going to be ... over IP engineers in 10 years' time?
No, I agree. I wholeheartedly agree, because I think that much as it pains IT people to sort of think this, IT is a method of delivery from point A to point B. Provided I put something in at one end, and provided they deliver it in a timely manner without any issues at the other end, exactly as I put it in, they've done their job. The challenge with the IT space is that it's not just within a building anymore, it's around the world, it's using public internet, it's using all sorts of different things which they sometimes don't have control over. So there are nuances in that we have to understand and have to work around to make that work. But IT is a delivery mechanism. It's an RJ45 on the wall which gets plugged in, and at the other end, somewhere in the world, they plug into an RJ45 and they get the signal out again. And the IT role is to get it from point A to point B cleanly, and what I put in is what's got to come out the other end. Where we talked earlier about the difference between IT and AV is that the AV space is then what's the quality of that signal that goes in, and how good is it, and what's the quality of the signal at the other end, and how do I display it, or how do I put it through speakers. And that's why the AV and the IT streams need to work together in parallel with each other, but I cannot see a time, at least in my living future, where IT people will have the same skills as AV people, and frankly also the other way around.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that's sort of scary but clever way to kind of end.
It's good for us as an industry though, isn't
it? Peter, Mike, Stuart, Daniel, many thanks for your time, appreciate it. Thank you for joining us for this video, and there's plenty more to choose from on our video channels throughout ISE 2020. Many thanks for joining us, and goodbye.